All right, so are you ready to dive into some UK drone law?
Oh, absolutely. I think this is going to be a fascinating one.
Yeah, this stuff is getting more and more important, you know.
It really is, with the drone industry just booming over there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, think about it. Businesses are using drones for deliveries. Hobbyists are getting amazing footage.
It seems like everyone wants a piece of the sky these days.
So knowing the rules isn't just a good idea, it's crucial.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is the UK is actually ahead of the curve here. They've really worked on putting together a clear legal framework.
Oh, that's good to hear. So it's not like the Wild West out there.
Not at all. They're focused on safety, privacy, and responsible growth.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. Our source today is Taking Flight. That's Taking Flight, your comprehensive guide to UK drone laws for commercial operations. It's from a company called Horus Drones.
Yeah, I've heard of them. They actually provide drone services, right?
Exactly. So they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk.
Makes their guide even more valuable. Then they really know their stuff.
Right. And one thing they really emphasize is the why behind the rules.
It's easy to just think of it as red tape, but it's so much more than that.
Okay, so it's not just about avoiding fines.
No, it's about making sure drones are integrated safely and responsibly.
Makes sense. Because a drone mishap could have serious consequences.
Exactly. That's why the UK has the Civil Aviation Authority, the CAA.
So the CAA is kind of like air traffic control for drones then.
That's a great way to put it. They set the rules and force them, provide guidance.
Okay, so they're the ones to go to for all things drone related in the UK. What kind of guidance do they give?
Well, their CFP 722 series is like the drone pilot's Bible.
Okay, we might have to check that out after this then.
Definitely. It covers everything from registration to airspace and procedures.
Sounds pretty comprehensive. Now, I've heard this myth about lightweight drones. Like if it's small and light, you don't need to register or get licensed.
Yeah, that's a common one. But unfortunately, it's totally false.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So even those tiny drones need to be registered.
If you're using them for commercial purposes, then yes, absolutely.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So even if you're just taking real estate photos on weekends, that still counts as commercial.
As long as you're making money from it, it's considered a commercial operation.
Got it. So no matter the size, if you're making money, register with the CAA. What about actually flying the drone? Do I need a special license for that?
For commercial operations, yes, you definitely do.
Okay,
Right.
what does that involve?
Well, first, you have to be at least 18 years old.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then there's a theory test covering air law procedures and drone-specific regulations.
So it's not just about knowing how to fly the drone itself.
Right. You need to understand the whole airspace and your responsibilities within it.
And after the theory test,
You'll need to complete an approved flight training course.
so you get some hands-on experience and learn to operate safely.
Exactly. It's all about making sure you're a competent and responsible pilot.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've busted the myth about lightweight drones, and we know about licensing requirements. Now, where can you actually fly this thing?
That's a great question because you can't just fly anywhere you like.
I figured as much. What are the restrictions?
Well, first off, the UK airspace is divided into different zones.
Oh, the different areas have different rules.
Exactly. And some areas, like around airports, are highly restricted.
Okay, so no flying your drone near Heathrow just for fun.
Definitely not. You'd need explicit permission from air traffic control for that.
So it's kind of like having different speed limits on different roads.
That's a really good analogy. You need to know the rules for the specific zone.
So before each flight, I need to check the maps and see what zone I'm in.
Exactly. And the CAA website has tons of information about airspace classifications.
Okay, good to know. So airspace is one thing, but what about the land below? Can I fly over someone's property?
That's another important one. Even if you're not landing, you still need permission.
Really? Even if I'm just flying over?
Yes, property rights extend upwards into the airspace.
Wow, I had no idea. So no drone footage of my neighbor's barbecue without their consent.
Nope. You need to be respectful of those property boundaries.
Okay, good to know. What about privacy in general? Drones have cameras, after all.
Absolutely. The UK's data protection laws like GDPR apply to drone footage, too.
So it's not just a free-for-all. I can't just film whoever I want.
Right. If you're capturing images of people, you need a legitimate reason.
And usually their consent.
In most cases, yes. Consent is key when it comes to personal data.
Okay, so no unauthorized drone paparazzi. Got it. So we've covered who governs drones, busted the lightweight drone myth, and talked about licensing airspace, land ownership, and privacy. Anything else we should touch on before we move on?
Well, we haven't gotten into specific rules for operating a drone during a flight.
Oh, right. Like altitude, distance, how you actually fly the thing.
Exactly. There are definitely rules there, especially for commercial operations.
Okay, so tell me more about these operational rules.
Well, for starters, there are maximum altitude limits for drones.
Makes sense. How high can you go?
Generally, you can't fly higher than 120 meters, which is about 400 feet.
Okay, I can visualize that. What else?
You also need to maintain a minimum distance from people and buildings.
So no buzzing right over someone's head or flying too close to structures.
Exactly. You need to keep a safe distance. The general rule is at least 50 meters from people.
Okay, so keep your distance, prioritize safety. Got it.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yes, one of the most important rules is maintaining visual line of sight.
Visual line of sight. What does that mean?
It means you need to be able to see your drone with your own eyes at all times.
So I can't just rely on the camera feed.
Correct. You need to visually track it and make sure it's operating safely.
So no flying it behind buildings or out of sight.
Exactly. Visual contact is essential for safe and responsible drone operations.
Got it. Now, we talked about airspace zones before and restricted areas. Can you elaborate on those a bit more?
Sure. So we call those restricted areas controlled airspace.
Controlled airspace. Okay.
It's the area around airports, military installations, and other sensitive locations.
So places where regular air traffic is tightly controlled.
Exactly. And flying a drone there without authorization is a big no-no. Safety is paramount in those areas, and there are very good reasons for the restrictions.
Okay, so no casual drone flights near Heathrow then?
Definitely not. If you need to operate in controlled airspace, there's a formal process. You need a detailed flight plan and explicit authorization from air traffic control.
Wow, so it's pretty serious business.
It is. You don't want to mess around with controlled airspace.
Okay, I'm getting a much clearer picture of all this. It's not just about avoiding airports, it's about respecting the rules. Getting permission from landowners, protecting privacy, and following the operational rules.
That's a great summary. You're really getting it.
Anything else I should know before we move on?
Well, there's one more crucial aspect we need to discuss, and that's the ethical side.
Ethical. I thought we were talking about laws and regulations.
We are, but flying a drone responsibly goes beyond just ticking the legal boxes.
Oh, okay. So it's about making ethical decisions even when something's technically legal.
Exactly. It's about considering the impact of your actions on others and the environment.
Okay, so just because I can do something doesn't mean I should.
Precisely. For example, even if you have permission to fly over someone's property, is it ethical to do so if it's going to cause them distress or invade their privacy?
Right, so just because I can fly over my neighbor's backyard doesn't mean I should be peeking in their windows.
Exactly. Even if it's within your legal flight path.
Got it. Respect for privacy is key. And it's not just about people's homes either, right?
No, people have a reasonable expectation of privacy, even in public spaces.
So no drone paparazzi following celebrities around, even if they're at the park.
Precisely. It's about common sense and being mindful of others.
Okay, so privacy is one ethical consideration. What else is there?
Well, safety is another big one. We've talked about legal requirements. But even when you're operating within those limits, there's an element of judgment involved.
Okay, I can see that. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Even if you're allowed to fly up to a certain altitude, it might not be safe to do so in high winds or near obstacles.
So it's about being extra cautious even when you're technically following the rules.
Exactly. And it's about being prepared for the unexpected.
Like what happens if your drone malfunctions mid-flight?
Exactly. Do you have a plan to bring it down safely?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's like having an emergency plan just in case.
Precisely. And that plan should take into account the potential impact on the ground.
Right, I don't want my drone falling out of the sky and hitting someone's car.
Or worse, injuring someone.
Exactly. So thinking through those scenarios beforehand is crucial.
Absolutely. It's part of being a responsible drone operator.
Okay, so we've talked about privacy and safety. Any other ethical considerations?
Well, environmental impact is an important one, too.
Oh, right. Drones can probably disturb wildlife.
They can, especially if flown at low altitudes or in sensitive habitats.
So even if I'm flying in a legally permitted area, I should be mindful of the wildlife.
Absolutely. Observe the environment, be aware of nesting sites, and adjust accordingly.
Makes sense. It's about respecting the natural world even when we're up in the air.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of access rights.
Access rights? What do you mean?
Just because you can legally fly over an area doesn't mean you can access it on the ground.
Oh, right. Like if I need to retrieve my drone after it lands.
Exactly. You need to make sure you have permission to enter that property.
So don't trespass to get your drone back.
Nope. Always get permission from the landowner before entering private property.
Okay, got it. So ethical drone operation is about more than just following the rules. It's about being mindful of the impact on others and the environment.
Exactly. It's about thinking beyond just yourself and your drone.
Are there any best practices to help ensure I'm flying ethically?
There are definitely some things you can do.
Okay, let's hear them.
Well, first and foremost, as we've discussed, thorough pre-flight planning is essential.
Right, that's where we identify hazards, assess risks, and come up with strategies.
Exactly. But pre-flight planning also involves thinking about the ethical aspects. Will my flight path take me over private properties? Do I need permission? Are there any sensitive areas I should avoid?
So it's about integrating ethical considerations into every stage of the planning process.
Precisely. You want to think about these things before you ever take off. And then during the flight itself, following procedures is important.
Right, not just for safety, but also for minimizing our impact.
Exactly, like staying at the right altitude, keeping your distance.
Not flying over places where the noise would be a problem.
Exactly. And it's also good to remember communication.
All right, like if my flight might affect people on the ground.
Yeah, give them a heads up. Let them know what's going on.
It's like being a good neighbor, even up in the air.
Exactly. So pre-flight, during the flight, what about after?
Oh, yeah. Are there ethical considerations for wrapping things up?
Definitely. How you handle the data you collected is important.
Especially images or videos of people.
Right. Make sure you have their consent for any use of that data.
Data protection is a big deal these days.
It really is. You need to be mindful of that.
Okay, anything else for after the flight?
Yeah, it's good practice to review your flight logs and report any incidents.
Even near misses?
Yeah, even those. Report them to the authorities.
Okay, so transparency and accountability.
Exactly. It helps improve safety for everyone in the long run.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing staying up to date on this stuff is important too.
Absolutely. The drone industry is constantly evolving.
So it's not a learn it once and you're done kind of thing.
Nope. New technologies, best practices, even ethical considerations, they're all changing.
So continuous learning is key.
It is. The more informed you are, the better decisions you can make.
For yourself and for the industry as a whole.
Exactly. It's about moving forward responsibly.
Now, earlier you mentioned Horus Drones having an operational authorization. What is that exactly?
Yes. An operational authorization, or OA, is a certification from the CAA.
So it's like a stamp of approval.
Yeah, you could say that. It means they've gone above and beyond the basic standards.
So they've shown a deep understanding of the regulations.
And they have a strong safety management system.
Okay, so if I'm hiring a drone operator, an OA is something to look for.
Absolutely. It gives you peace of mind knowing they've been vetted by the CAA.
Makes sense. How does an operator go about getting one of these OAs?
Well, it's a pretty involved process. They have to apply to the CAA.
And show them their procedures, safety management, pilot qualifications.
Exactly. They need to prove they have the right insurance and risk assessments.
Yes, it's not just a rubber stamp.
No, it takes effort. But for serious operators, it's worth it.
It opens up more possibilities for them.
And it shows potential clients they're dealing with a top-tier provider.
It sets them apart from the crowd.
Exactly. It's a sign of professionalism and reliability.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. From the legal framework to ethical considerations, best practices, and the OA. It's clear that drone operations are complex with a lot to consider.
It's not just about knowing how to fly the drone.
Right. It's about understanding the bigger picture.
Exactly. Recognizing that drone operations have a real impact on the world around us.
And that we have a responsibility to use these machines in a beneficial way.
Well said. It's about more than just ourselves.
Now, before we get to our final thoughts, I want to mention our source material again. Taking Flight, your comprehensive guide to UK drone laws for commercial operations.
It's been incredibly helpful. A really practical overview of the key issues.
And it's coming from Horus Drones, who are out there providing drone services.
Exactly. So their insights are based on real-world experience.
They're dealing with these regulations every day.
They know the ins and outs, the things that can trip people up.
And their commitment to ethical drone operations is admirable.
They want to see this technology used for good.
So kudos to them for this guide. We'll be sure to link to their website in the show notes.
Definitely. It's a must-read for anyone serious about drone operations in the UK.
All right, let's move on to our final thoughts. What are some key takeaways for our listeners as they navigate UK drone law?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that understanding the regulations is essential.
The rules are there for a reason.
Exactly. It's about keeping everyone safe, protecting privacy, and making sure the drone industry can grow responsibly.
It's about being a responsible part of this community.
Exactly. It's not just about avoiding penalties. It's about doing things the right way.
Couldn't agree more. Safety and responsibility go hand in hand.
Right.
And we can't forget the ethical side, even when operating within the law.
Right. Thinking about the impact of our actions on others and the environment is crucial.
It's a holistic approach.
Recognizing that our choices have consequences beyond just ourselves.
And this industry is constantly changing.
It is. New technologies are always emerging, and the regulations will evolve too.
So staying informed is important.
Absolutely. This is a dynamic field, and we need to stay engaged in the conversation.
About the future of drone technology.
Exactly. Because the future is being shaped right now.
And we all have a role to play in making sure innovation and responsibility go together.
Well said. It's a collaborative effort.
Okay, before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a question to think about. We've talked about how UK drone law has evolved. But what about the future? What emerging technologies will shape the law even further?
That's a great question.
Things like autonomous drones, drone swarms beyond visual line-of-sight operations.
Those are all game changers. They're going to have a huge impact.
It's like we're on the verge of a whole new era of aviation.
And the law is still catching up.
Imagine drones delivering groceries or inspecting skyscrapers without a pilot.
The current rules weren't written with that in mind.
We need to figure out how to integrate these technologies safely and responsibly.
And that includes the technical aspects as well as the societal implications.
It's about the impact on our lives and communities.
Exactly. For example, autonomous drones raise questions about liability.
If a drone makes a decision that causes harm, who's responsible?
It's a complex issue.
Like the debate over self-driving cars, but now it's happening in the air.
Right. And there are concerns about privacy and surveillance as drones become more autonomous.
It's like those sci-fi movies where drones are always watching.
We need to figure out the ethical and legal boundaries before we get there.
And what about airspace management?
As the skies get more crowded with drones, how do we ensure safety and efficiency?
It's like we need a new air traffic control system just for drones.
We'll need sophisticated systems to track and manage them.
It's both amazing and a little bit daunting to think about.
It is, but it's also an incredibly exciting time to be involved in this industry.
We have the chance to shape the future of aviation.
In a way that benefits society and pushes the boundaries of what's possible.
Well said. So our deep dive today has given our listeners a good foundation.
For understanding the key considerations surrounding UK drone law.
By understanding the regulations, the ethical considerations, the best practices.
We can lay the groundwork for responsible and innovative drone operations.
In the years to come.
Absolutely. It's about building a solid foundation.
So to wrap things up, any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Embrace the future of drone technology, but never forget responsibility.
Stay informed about the regulations, engage in thoughtful discussions.
And operate your drones in a way that benefits everyone.
That's great advice. And remember, resources like the guide from Horus Drones are valuable. Listeners can find a link in our show notes.
It's a great way to stay up to date.
The future of drone technology is being written right now, and we all have a part to play.
Absolutely. We can shape the future together.
Well said. That brings us to the end of our deep dive into UK drone law. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, fly safe, fly smart, and fly responsibly.
It's true. Those are game changers. Those technologies you just mentioned, like autonomous drones and drone swarms beyond visual line-of-sight operations.
Yeah, it's like we're stepping into a whole new world almost.
Yeah, like a whole new era of aviation almost, and the law is trying to catch up.
Right, because imagine drones delivering groceries or inspecting buildings with no pilot.
The rules we have now, they weren't really written with that in mind.
So how do we make sure these new technologies are integrated safely?
It's going to take a lot of careful thought and collaboration.
Between lawmakers and experts and even the public.
Yeah, we need to figure out the technical side of things, of course.
But also the impact on society as a whole.
It's not just about the technology itself.
It's about how it affects our lives, our communities.
Exactly. Like with autonomous drones, you have all these questions about liability.
Right. If a drone makes a bad decision and causes harm, who's to blame?
The manufacturer, the operator, the person who wrote the software. It's tricky.
It's like that whole debate about self-driving cars, but now it's in the air.
Exactly. And then there's the privacy issue.
Right, because as drones get more autonomous and collect more data.
It's like those sci-fi movies where we're constantly being watched.
We need to set those boundaries now, the ethical and legal ones.
Before it gets out of hand.
And then there's the whole challenge of airspace management.
With more and more drones in the sky, how do we keep things running smoothly?
especially alongside traditional aircraft.
It's like we need a whole new air traffic control system just for drones.
One that can track and manage all that traffic,
Especially when we're talking about beyond visual line of sight operations.
where the pilot isn't actually watching the drone.
It's a lot to consider. It's mind-boggling, really.
It is, but it's also exciting,
Mhm.
to be a part of this.
Yeah, we have this incredible opportunity to shape the future of aviation.
To make it work for everyone, to push those boundaries.
Absolutely. I think that's what makes this so fascinating.
So today, we've really given our listeners a good overview.
Of the key things to think about when it comes to UK drone law.
We've talked about the regulations, the ethical side, the best practices.
And by understanding all of that,
We can create a future where drones are used responsibly and innovatively.
exactly. It all starts with knowledge and awareness.
So to wrap things up, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I'd say embrace the future of drone technology, but never forget about responsibility.
Stay informed about the rules. Have those ethical conversations.
And always strive to use these incredible machines for good.
That's great advice. And don't forget about resources like the guide from Horus Drones.
Yes, that's a great place to start for anyone who wants to learn more.
We'll include a link in our show notes.
The future of drone technology is being written right now, and we all have a role to play.
Well said. So that brings us to the end of our deep dive into UK drone